So many big transfer rumours have popped up over the last 7 days, including Antoine Semenyo and Manchester United. That's a rumour that is really picking up pace. Thiago Silva coming back to the Premier League. Endrick has all but left Real Madrid. That's going to be confirmed in the upcoming days. You've got Marc Guehi's next destination looking more like Manchester City. There's so much to talk about today. Let's get on with it. We're going to start with Brennan Johnson though, because in recent days it looks like he is extremely close to the exit door in the January window from Tottenham Hotspur. He's apparently closing in on a move to Crystal Palace. Now, say what you want about Brennan Johnson, and I think people can talk about his all-round game, his dribbling ability, his chance creation numbers, being on the low side. But he is an effective goal scorer. You saw that last season. You've seen that in his time at Nottingham Forest. In the final third, in the box, he is quite clinical. His XG numbers are really impressive, about 0.3 per 90. Puts him in the top sort of 15% of European wingers for his age. So in terms of an effective point of view, he will get you goals. You look at his numbers across the last 3 seasons, they stand out. In his 3 full seasons of Premier League football, he's got 11 goal involvements at Nottingham Forest, 15 goal involvements in the Premier League at Spurs, 14 goal involvements in the Premier League at Spurs. So it's a player who guarantees you, on paper, 10 plus goal involvements a season at a massively reduced fee because Tottenham are looking to offload him. Given that he's still just 24 years old and the fee isn't going to be that lofty, I think this would be a bit of a top move. You look at what Crystal Palace need, they do need attacking depth. Behind Ismaila Sarr and Yeremy Pino, they don't have that many options. The goal numbers haven't been that impressive domestically from any of the attackers beyond Jean-Philippe Mateta so far this campaign. In fact, the second top scorer at Palace in the Premier League is Daniel Munoz on 3. He is out for a sustained period of time as well. So with Ismaila Sarr picking up injury problems, going to AFCON, you look at the forward options they've got, they aren't that deep. They haven't got loads of goals. Yeremy Pino, as effective as he's been, as good as he's been, has only scored 1 Premier League goal so far this season. So by adding Brennan Johnson, you add goal threat and depth, that's for sure. But does he fit the system? Well, I didn't originally think Ismaila Sarr would fit this Ollie Glasner system. Playing a little bit more inside has actually helped him. Maybe that would be the case for Brennan Johnson. And what you can guarantee is that Ollie Glasner is going to improve him. Glasner is just such a top coach that I trust him at this stage pretty much implicitly to get the best out of a player like Brennan Johnson. The big question, I suppose, from Johnson's point of view would be, how long is Glasner going to be here? And what does the club and team look like when he departs in the summer? Whilst we're on the topic of Spurs, let's talk about the goalkeeping situation. Lots of rumours bubbling away about James Trafford potentially arriving in the January window. Now, this news has really hotted up because of the form of Vicario. Spurs fans aren't happy at all. The performance against Forest was pretty shambolic. He's given away some really poor goals in recent weeks. And clearly, Spurs are in the market for a long-term option there and see James Trafford as that guy. I think even if this doesn't happen in the January window, which I actually think it's unrealistic to imagine it, in the summer, this is one to keep your eye on. From Trafford's point of view, I'm pretty sure he would want the move. You know, he arrived at Manchester City expecting to be the long-term number 1 prior to that Donnarumma arrival, but now Donnarumma's there, the minutes just aren't going to come. The World Cup spot is under massive threat. In fact, as things stand, I don't see a world in which Trafford goes to the World Cup. But I also didn't see a world in which Man City willingly let him leave in the January window. They are competing for the Champions League, the Premier League, on multiple fronts. Donnarumma has a pretty checkered injury record in recent seasons. Why would they allow him to go in the January window? To be nice? That's not how top-level clubs operate. I think it's much more likely they keep him until the summer window, then look to recoup the fee they paid Burnley for him. Because overall, he's a fantastic young goalkeeper. The performances last season at Burnley, the XG overperformance, the amount of goals they conceded as a club, absolutely eye-watering. I think all of us see James Trafford as a future England number 1, but I don't think it's going to be at Manchester City. So, in the summer, great option for Spurs. Great option for Newcastle. Do I see Man City letting him leave in January? No. Tyreek George looks like he might well leave Chelsea, which would come as a little bit of a surprise to me because he's playing quite a significant amount of minutes in the cup games. He started all 3 games in the EFL Cup. He started 2 Champions League games as well. Maybe Chelsea are thinking as they head to the latter stage of these tournaments, particularly the Champions League, minutes are going to sort of be pulled back for George. And it's been interesting to see at the start of this season him utilised more as a striker under Maresca. Of course, he was very close to leaving the club in the summer window. He had pretty much all but agreed to join Fulham. That move then was scuppered because of the late arrivals of Chukwueze and Kevin. But it now appears he might well move on in January. And he's being heavily linked with a move to Germany and RB Leipzig. RB Leipzig themselves are absolutely flying. Do they need Tyreek George? I think is a legitimate question. When you look at the forward options they've got, especially in wide areas, on that right-hand side, Bakayoko and Diamande, unbelievable. On the left-hand side, they've got Nusa. Through the middle, they've got Romulo, and they've got Harder. So where does Tyreek George fit in to what is already an incredibly deep, young attacking unit that is firing on all cylinders for Leipzig? Well, maybe he offers cover for Nusa on that left-hand side, because at the end of the day, RB Leipzig are aware that not all of these forwards are going to be there in the long term. You know, it's extremely likely Diamande, for instance, moves on as early as the summer. Some are reporting he could move on in January. I would be extremely surprised. I don't see that happening. But having a player like Tyreek George as backup to Nusa, as competition in multiple forward areas, and as a long-term option if another one of these players leaves, it is smart future planning. Is it a good move for Tyreek George? Yeah, it would be a top move for Tyreek George. I think he's perfectly suited for that league. I think the minutes would probably be increased on what we're seeing domestically, at least, in the league for Chelsea. And if Leipzig want him, I think it's really telling they believe he could have an impact in the long term and then be resold for a profit. That is the operating model of Leipzig. I think it would be a positive for Chelsea. Good depth for Leipzig. And if Chelsea can get some sort of fee, he's an academy player, it's nothing but profit. Conor Gallagher looks like he's going to return to the Premier League. Newcastle are the latest club being linked with him. You look at those Newcastle midfield options, does Conor Gallagher need to be added? I think that's the key question here. When you look at Tonali, Bruno G, Joel Linton, Jacob Ramsey, Lewis Miley, where does Conor Gallagher fit? Well, certainly he fits with how Eddie Howe traditionally has wanted his midfield to operate, which is extremely high energy, very aggressive. Conor Gallagher, excellent at nearly all of those things. In fact, I would probably say a lot of his best assets, Conor Gallagher, are those in an off-the-ball sense. His tenacity, his pressing, his tackling, his shape and awareness. I think some of his best football came under Thomas Tuchel when he was playing a very similar role. But do I see him starting for Newcastle? Not really. Do I think Newcastle need a different style of midfielder to Conor Gallagher? A little bit. I think they're missing some creativity. I want to see more minutes for Jacob Ramsey. I want to see a little bit less favouritism from Eddie Howe at times. Look, I think this would be an okay deal, especially if it was on loan. It would add depth. It would add quality. You saw the impact that having a player like Kieran Trippier come from Atletico Madrid with his experience, both under Diego Simeone and on a European stage, had at Newcastle. It was massive. Could Conor Gallagher provide a similar level impact? I'm slightly doubtful, but if you're not going to pay, this is not the worst move. Endrick is about to leave Real Madrid on loan. He is pretty much wrapped up as a deal for Lyon. It looks like he's going to join them as soon as the January window opens. Of course, they're crying out for goals. I think they've only scored 22 league goals. It's 9th best in Liga. Martin Satriano, obviously coming off the back of that ACL, hasn't really hit the ground running, especially as a Mikatadze replacement. He joined Villarreal very late in the window. Does Endrick provide those goals? This is a risk for Lyon. It is. We don't know. We haven't seen any of Endrick playing in European football, really, outside of his excellent run in the Copa del Rey last season. This campaign, was it 22 minutes of football? Xabi Alonso doesn't fancy him. Clearly, Real Madrid are keen to allow him to move on loan. It'll be interesting to see whether that loan move has any option or obligation to buy. I doubt it. I think Real Madrid are going to want him back in the long term. But he has to hit the ground running for Lyon. They have to find somebody who can contribute goals to this team quickly. I wonder whether Lyon needed a slightly more experienced number 9. I think there's a lot to ask an 18, 19-year-old with as limited experience as Endrick's got to come in and solve the goal-scoring issues at that club. Jan-Paul van Hecke is still being linked with a move away from Brighton in the January window. I don't see it. I think it's unrealistic that he leaves in January. I think it's very realistic he leaves next summer. His contract is up in 2027. I still think Van Hecke is one of the most underrated defenders in the Premier League. His ball-playing ability, whenever you watch Brighton, I'm shocked at how good he is on the ball. He's in the top 2% of European centre-backs for his progressive passes and his progressive carries. And when you look at him this season, he's contributed, I think, the most goals of any central defender in the league. the third most successful long balls, the third most successful short passes, the most successful passes into the opposition half. From a statistical analysis point of view, Van Heck pops in nearly every metric you would want from a modern day central defender on the ball. He is exceptional in that area. When you combine that with the fact he's still just 25 years old and is a real dog of a defender, he's super aggressive when you watch him play. A lot of the top teams, I think, could do worse than signing Van Heck. His contract is up in 2027. There's value to be had here. Okay, we're back to Antoine Semenyo. We talked about him potentially going to Liverpool last week. This week, the rumours have really shifted to Manchester-based clubs. Man City and Manchester United, both heavily interested in signing him in the January window. And a lot of reports are steering Semenyo towards United. Firstly, where are United getting this money from? He's got a £65 million release clause in January. That is a significant amount of money for a club who spent way into their revolving credit facility last campaign to bring players like Mbeumo and Cunha and Sesko to the club. Do United need to add another £65 million forward to their ranks? Especially when the midfield is the area that is so obviously crying out for long-term support. You know, Casemiro getting no younger, probably going to leave in the summer. Bruno Fernandes, a blockbuster interview this week in which he claimed the club was attempting to move him on, but the manager wanted to keep him. It feels like at the end of the season, his future is going to come into question again. Kobbie Mainoo, his future is in question right now. Ugarte, I think the club would probably move him on if the right offer came in the January window. So is the midfield not the area that the £65 million needs to be spent on in January? Well, I think it clearly is, but that's not what we're discussing right now. We're discussing whether or not Semenyo would be good for Manchester United. The answer is yes. United are scoring goals for fun right now. They're the second top scorers in the league, joint with Arsenal, 30 goals scored. Last campaign, they couldn't hit the net. Honestly, they were allergic to scoring goals last season. So first and foremost, it's great to see the club banging him in again. And adding a player like Semenyo would only strengthen the options in that forward line, especially when you consider Joshua Zirkzee might leave the club. If he did, and you replaced him with a player like Antoine Semenyo, I think that's a very clear upgrade. But where does he start? Because Cunha in that left 10, looking extremely strong. And Mbeumo in the right 10. Mason Mount can cover both of those sides. Sesko's playing up front. Ahmad can play in one of those 10 positions. I even read a report this week that he could potentially come in as a wing-back on the left. Is that the area United see Semenyo in? As a left wing-back? Semenyo and Ahmad as wing-backs. Cunha and Mbeumo as the 10s. Sesko up front. Or Mount in there as well. What kind of lineup is that? What are we doing? Now, no doubt, I would kind of be interested to see whether or not it works. Semenyo's defensive numbers, obviously through the roof because he is such a pressing monster. Under Andoni Iraola, his goal-scoring numbers, his XG, his ball-carrying ability, all through the roof. He statistically looks amazing. When you watch him, you're blown away because of his physicality and his strength and his power on the ball. So could he offer an option as a left wing back? I can't even believe I'm saying it. Either way, let's pretend United do have a plan for Semenyo's arrival. It would be a top move. If United can beat Liverpool, Arsenal, City, Spurs to this signing, I would be blown away. I don't know why Semenyo would go to Manchester United. There were heavy reports in the summer that Ruben Amorim had sat down with him. United were really close to agreeing a deal with him. Obviously, Amorim has spoken publicly recently about how much he loves Semenyo. Clearly, the club like him. There's no hiding away from that. But Semenyo, there's some really good teams on the table for you here, pal. Now, I'm not saying Man United aren't one of those teams, but how do you fit into the side? On the blue half of Manchester, Marc Guehi's name is doing serious rounds with seriously reliable journalists supporting this story as well. It looks like he's going to have his pick of clubs in the summer, but this is a big but for me. I think it's really important to remember that he can sign a pre-contract agreement with a club externally to the Premier League in Europe in January, but he can't sign a pre-contract with a club in the Premier League in that window. I personally think you might well see Marc Guehi sign a pre-contract with Barcelona or Real Madrid in this January window. If that doesn't happen, I can see him ending up at Man City. You know, Liverpool obviously led the race all summer. I think it's very obvious where he would fit alongside Virgil van Dijk. He would be a starter in this team. But Man City are going to want long-term options, especially when you think of John Stones. that injury again this season. It looks like his minutes are going to be very, very limited. And you've got to think how much Pep likes to rotate his side, how much he likes to rotate the back line. It would be very possible for me to see Marc Guehi being a consistent starter at the heart of that defence. It's almost impossible to call, but if I was a betting man, I would bet on one of the Spanish sides, agreeing a pre-contract in January. If Palace choose to cash in the January window, which is still quite possible, I think, they might well get 20 or 30 million pounds. And if that happens, it's only going to be to a Premier League side. So this is going to be one to watch. Where's your money? Is it like me on the Spanish boys? Hayden Hackney is being linked with a January move to Everton. I think this one is pretty unrealistic unless there is some sort of super offer coming through the table. Since Kim Helberg has got to Borough, 4 wins in 5 games? And I think the first game he managed was Cov. So let's say 4 in 4 really. They're flying up the table, 5 points clear of the playoffs. And Hayden Hackney is the key man to this side, to this structure. He's the best midfielder in the Championship. He's put up the most minutes of any player in the Borough squad as well. And at just 23 years old, he's still young enough that you feel the January window isn't bust for him. It's not move or bust. He could just hold out until the summer, potentially get an even better side than Everton. I think there's going to be a lot of interested parties on the continent, especially if he takes Borough up this season. What I've really liked recently about Hayden is that he's even adding goals and assists to his game. Last campaign was his best ever goal contributing season. He put up 8. I think it was 5 goals, 3 assists. Already this season, 5 goals, 3 assists in the Championship. A couple screamers in there as well. His work around the edge of the box is an absolute delight. He pops in absolutely every metric. He could be playing European football next season, Hayden Hackney. That's how high I think his ceiling is. At the Championships in the summer with the 21s, he came out as a winner. I think that added to his resume as well. Super high ceiling Hayden Hackney, but I don't see him leaving in January. Why would Borough let that happen? Thiago Silva wants to come back to England. He wants to spend more time with his family. He's 41 now. Obviously, he's left Fluminense. He's available on a free transfer. We've seen videos of John Terry hyping up a move back to Chelsea. He's not going to go back to Chelsea, so let's forget about that. But could he come back to another London-based side? Fulham, West Ham, Brentford. Their names are all said to be in the hat. And I'm going to be honest, I know he's 41. I think this would be an okay deal for a couple of those clubs. Like, is he worse at 41 than Mavropanos or some of the options West Ham have got at the centre of defence? Would he start for Brentford? I think probably yes still. Maybe not over Bassey and Anderson at Fulham, but he would provide competition and experience. I think all 3 clubs could do a lot worse than bringing him in on a 6-month deal. Yes, it would be almost comical, and I'm sure a lot of the sort of statistical analysis guys and data experts at home would be laughing at the move. But he played 21 games last season in the Brazilian Serie A. It's a very competitive league. He played a lot of minutes for a player of his age. He doesn't have to come into the Premier League and play loads of minutes, but he can provide huge experience off the field more than anything, and I don't think his wage would be that eye-watering because of his age. Harvey Elliott is going to leave West Ham. This one will happen. It's not happening for him under Unai Emery. Clearly, the coach doesn't fancy him. He's only on loan from Liverpool, although there were triggers for an obligation to buy after a certain amount of appearances were hit. I think it was 10 appearances. It's not going to happen. He's on 5 appearances. It looks like he will return to the club in January. Such a shame for him. Feels like a waste of a 6 months at a vital stage of his career, coming off the back of, you know, being the best player at the Under-21 Championships in the summer. He was magnificent for England. That move to Villa, I thought was going to be a banger. I did think it was going to be a banger, but he hasn't suited the system. Morgan Rogers has eaten up all of those minutes effectively in that 10 space. And what it means for his future, I don't know. Clearly, Liverpool wanted to get rid of him in the summer. Clearly, Arne Slot wasn't that into him, otherwise he would have kept hold of him. So does that mean he gets another move in the January window? Could it be on loan to another club? And which club would that be? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts at home. Any Liverpool fans, would you like to see him come back, especially with Salah potentially leaving? Alex Scott and Tyler Adams' names both being linked to Manchester United. That's right, United being linked to 3 Bournemouth players in a week. The same week, obviously, that they drew 4-4 with them. I wonder why that might be. But we have to talk about it. So Alex Scott, I like how Iraola's changed his positional play this season to a much deeper line playmaker role. You know, at Bristol City, we saw him sort of playing in that 10. He's so techie, he's so creative, he's a fabulous dribbler of the ball. Alex Scott, I think that's one of the reasons he's been called up to the England first team squad. But do I see Manchester United being able to sign him in January? No, I'm realistic. I don't see any world in which Bournemouth would let him leave, just like I don't see any world in which they'd let Tyler Adams leave. These are potentially options for the summer. Fine. Tyler Adams, I think there are question marks over whether or not that's the right fit. Huge tackle numbers, the third most tackles of any midfielder in the Premier League so far this season. He's massively combative. He's super aggressive. But on the ball, you know, his progressive pass numbers are about half of what Casemiro is putting up. He is not a natural passer of the ball through the lines. And that is what Manchester United need. They need somebody deep that can progress the ball from A to B that isn't just Bruno Fernandes. So there are question marks about the Tyler Adams deal, especially when you consider he's under contract till 2028. For Alex Scott, they would just be pulling your pants down. He's under a very long-term contract. He's one of the most exciting 22-year-old midfielders in the league. I would have at least one more season of development if I was at Bournemouth and I was Alex Scott. Nicholas Fulkr is going to join AC Milan. This one looks like it's all pretty much signed, sealed and delivered at this stage. They've had a horrible time with it. Of course, Santiago Jimenez arrived in the sum of 37 million euros. It looks like he's going to undergo that ankle surgery because the forward options that Milan have got just aren't scoring goals. Outside of, you know, Pulisic, they apparently see Fulkr as a short-term 6-month gap that could score some goals for them. Feels like they're going to try their best to sign Vlahovic in the summer. Fine. Yeah, Fulkr probably will score a few goals at AC Milan. He's been an absolute diabolical transfer for West Ham. Hasn't worked in any metric, in any way. This is just such a, 6-month loan for Fulkr if you're AC Milan. Final name we're briefly going to touch upon is a potential replacement for Nicholas Fulkr, and that is Josh Sargent. Norwich are struggling really, really badly this season. Josh Sargent, sort of the shining light, I suppose you would say, at the club. It's not been pretty for Norwich. They have not been playing good football, and yet he's still been scoring goals, or at least at the start of the season was still scoring goals. In fact, he's only scored once since August, but he's still put up 9 goal involvements for the club. Last 3 seasons at Norwich, he's gone 13 goals, 16 goals, 15 goals. So there is a goal-scoring number 9 there. I think you need to ignore his time in the Premier League originally when he was sort of playing that second fiddle role to Teemu Pukki, because this is a really decent player. Now, is it the player that scores enough goals to make West Ham go, we found our number 9? I'm a little bit unconvinced, but given that Norwich are going to be in a pretty dire situation, and he might well push to leave, I think this will be an okay deal. Don't shoot the messenger, West Ham fans. I think there are worse options. Okay, so those are some of the best and worst transfer rumours of the week. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. I'll see you later. Goodbye.